I'm proud to introduce the 28th coach in Detroit Red Wings hockey history, Derek Lalonde. Derek, welcome to Detroit.
Thank you. Very excited for the opportunity and the challenge.
Well, it's been a whirlwind week, I would imagine, for you, coaching in the Tampa Bay Lightning, the final against the Avalanche, and then now you're here as the head coach of Detroit. Take us through the last week, and what was it like for you?
It was a whirlwind, there's no doubt about that. Obviously, you get in the playoffs, you're ingrained in the playoffs. Then you start getting late in the playoffs, conference finals, the finals, and we've experienced this over 3 years. There's not a lot of sleep in there. Your 8 o'clock games, they don't start to 8:20. You're not getting out of the rink midnight, 1, and then you're turning around 7 a.m. So that's all part of the process. I wouldn't want it any other way, the fact that we kept going that far within the process. And you have that emotions, really tough emotions of losing the Stanley Cup Finals. The better team won. Colorado was the better team. But with that said, as a coach, it felt like a winnable series, so there's some regrets. You really feel for the guys because they laid it out on the line, and it was a special group. And then you kind of decompress. So many emotions running. I want to get back with my family. I want to catch up with that. I want to catch up with some Netflix. Spend some off season like anyone else. And Steve texted me that afternoon, and he was like, I apologize for reaching out so quickly after losing, but I'd like to talk to you. And we talked throughout the night. I was able to get out here on Tuesday. We talked all day, pretty much on and off throughout Wednesday, and we were able to get to a situation where I would be the next head coach on Thursday, and it hasn't stopped. But again, I wouldn't want it any other way. The Stanley Cup championships, the runs, and then an opportunity with such a historic organization. It's still a little bit surreal.
Derek, Steve Yzerman not only hired you once, but twice. Once as an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and now the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. What's your working relationship like with Steve?
Well, he did hire me, so I think it helped to have a little familiarity with Steve. He wasn't a huge part of that process. I did most of that with John Cooper. The whole time I felt like I was John Cooper, but I did interview with Steve, so there's a little relationship. I worked 1 year with Steve. He actually went from the GM role to the assistant GM role, so it helped to have a little relationship with him, but it became much more intense through this process. And so I think it's positive. I've seen what a special coach, general manager relationship looks like with John Cooper and Julian Brisebois, and to me it's one of the reasons why they've had the success they've had in Tampa. So that's going to be a very important relationship for me, just like anything else. I want to be on the same page. And throughout this process, it was pretty evident that we were very similar in some values and what we saw in this organization, how I could fit there. So I would say pretty positive going forward.
Looking at your resume, you're pretty experienced as a coach, both at all levels as a head coach, assistant coach. But when you look at yourself, when did you start to think, you know what, I could be ready for a head coaching job in the NHL?
That's a great question, and I'm being honest when I mean this. I didn't really think that too often. It was never, maybe in the back of my mind, it was never in the forefront of my mind. I've been very fortunate my whole career. I took an approach and a strategy of be in the present, be great at the job you're at, and be passionate with it. And I was always that. Whether I was in Green Bay in the USHL, I could have been there 10 more years, and I wanted to be great there. The phone rings, ironically enough, Detroit Red Wings, Ryan Martin calls me. We want to be better in Toledo, today's cap era. We need most of the baseball, AAA, AA affiliates, something you would be interested in. Would love Toledo, I'd love that organization. I could have been there for 10 years. Same thing with Iowa, and even in Tampa, it was never about being the next head coach of another NHL team. It was about just being good at where I was at and trying to be great at where I was at, and it seems to always take care of itself. So realistically, obviously we have this historic run. We win 1 Stanley Cup, we win 2 Stanley Cups. We're on a run for a chase at a 3rd Stanley Cup. It became probably evident that I would get in front of some teams and talk to them, but ultimately, maybe within the last week or two, where I'm like, this may really happen, and I feel very fortunate and lucky that is with the Detroit Red Wings.
Derek, every coach has a philosophy on how they coach their team. What is your philosophy?
I'm a relationship-based person. I ultimately want the guy to play for the person next to him. I want guys to play for me. I want to work hard for them. And that comes through relationships. That's who I've been. I believe I'm a good communicator. It's human nature for me to build strong relationships, to want to get to know players, to care for them. And I learned early on, be who you are, and that's who I am. And that's translated very well for me. It'll be no different here. Obviously, within that head coaching role, there's going to be harder decisions. There's going to be a different level of holding guys accountable that has to come from the head coach, as ultimately the buck stops with the head coach. But for me, it would be relationships, communication, and I think that has worked very well for me.
Have you had a chance to talk with any of the Detroit Red Wing players yet?
No, very important. Reached out to Dylan last night, just kind of reaching out, hoping maybe he'd be here today. He's out of town, which he should be on a holiday weekend. I told him I'd catch up. But it's very important for me, you're sitting here, it's a whirlwind, but you got that immediate 24-hour plan. You got that immediate 1 week plan. You got that 1 month plan. You got a year plan. And the immediate is those calling every single player, have an opportunity to talk with them, try to get to know them a little bit. It'll be very casual because those initial conversations, those initial relationships are very, very important going forward. So that'll be over the next few days.
I would imagine, Derek, that you've seen it all in your coaching experience. You've coached so many teams in the past. A little bit of a different place here in Detroit. You were at Tampa Bay, winning Stanley Cups, one of the best teams in the National Hockey League on a year-to-year basis. Now you come to a team like Detroit that's in the process of building a foundation and rebuilding. How difficult is that challenge for you, or do you look at it as a challenge?
I look at them very similar in some ways. I know you're going to sit there, but what do you mean similar? You're in a window of being a Stanley Cup champion type team. But you look back, we did not get over the hump in Tampa until we detailing our game, habits within our game, when we improved our team defense, when we took less risk out of our game, when we gave up less odd mans. We started analytically winning some of those type of battles. I don't think it's any different here. If you take care of those details, you take care of those habits, hopefully winning takes care of itself. Obviously, we're not in a similar situation in Tampa where we were going from here to there to become good to a Stanley Cup championship team, but it is similar. We're trying to grow, and it's going to take some time. He was very clear in this interview process that it's not going to happen overnight, but he liked where it was going. He liked where it was building. Me seeing it from afar, I can see some positives in this. They were a very tough team to play against. You could see those young, talented players make impacts, which is very hard to do in this league. So you can see some building blocks that gets me very excited.
An original 6 team, Detroit Red Wings. There's only 6 of them, and you're with a team that has a lot of history. What do you know about the Red Wings, and what comes to mind when you think of Detroit Red Wings?
The history of it, and it is special, and it is deep. And make no mistake, this is a huge, huge honor and a huge responsibility. Growing up when I played college hockey, right, it was when the Red Wings started their special run of late, and I laughed when I was talking with Drapes before the interview. And I don't sleep in the playoffs. No coach does. It's just, one, it's the schedule. It never shuts off. It's nothing to have a 3-hour, maybe get a nap before the game and just keep going. The other night, I think I mentioned it in the press conference, I finally was on my way to get to bed, maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock. I would be back in the office at 7. I think we were preparing for game 5 or 4 in the Stanley Cup Finals. And that 30 for 30 came on. And I'm like, I'm not going to watch it. I'm going to record it. And then, okay, I'm watching it. So there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of passion. I think that history is very important. I think our players need to know that. It's an honor to be part of this organization, and you better treat it as such. And I take that same approach as the coach of the Detroit Red Wings.
Every team in the National Hockey League, Derek, has an identity. Looking at this Detroit Red Wing team, what can you tell the fans what the identity of the Detroit Red Wings will be?
I think you saw parts of it. A team that is on top of you, a team that's not giving up time and space, a team that's hard to play against. And I think a little of the frustration with some of the fan base is, I understand, because they saw some parts of that. It's just probably not consistent enough, and obviously for whatever reason, things started to unravel towards the end of the season. So I think any good team, any quality team, it looks the same. A team that is playing on top of you, they're not giving up space, they're possessing the puck. I look at the evolution of the Colorado Avalanche. They're a Stanley Cup caliber team. They're in their window, but until we played them, probably didn't appreciate how good they were defensively and how their defense started in the O-zone. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I think people have this impression we were a high-flying, skilled team, but when you played us, you understood we took care of our end first. So I think that's going to be the identity. It's going to have to be the identity. It's going to be the goal of all of us, to make that our identity. Probably start from the net out and go from there.
Well, the team gave up 312 goals last year, and obviously you can't make the playoffs if you're allowing over 300 goals in the season. But what little things do the players have to do to really cut those goals against down and just play better overall on the defensive side of the puck?
Yeah, I don't think it's any mystery. Our team defense will have to improve from where it was last year. And I think it's what you prioritize and what you care about and what you have a passion about. And for myself and the staff, we're obviously going to emphasize being better within our team defense. Now it's up to the guys to buy in and to work towards that goal.
Special teams, as you know, always a key in the National Hockey League as far as winning games. What are your thoughts about the Red Wings specialty teams, and how can that get better?
Like any team, your goal going into a season is being good in special teams, improve special teams. It was no different for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I interviewed for the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of helping the penalty kill. One of my responsibilities when I interviewed there is we need improved penalty kill. It's always going to be something we strive for. Obviously, analytically, statistically, both the power play and penalty kill probably not where we want it to be. And again, it's what you prioritize. And we need to be better in a lot of areas, but of course, in that special team. So it'll be a point of emphasis when I'm looking out for our staff and that hire. It'll be something that's going to be a priority for us.
I'd imagine you're pretty excited about seeing some of the young talent here with the Detroit Red Wings. And just to name a few, Lucas Raymond, Mo Sider, who won the Calder Trophy, Simon Edmondson, there's high hopes for him. And, I guess fans in the prospect tournament will take a look at him in the preseason games, I would imagine, as well. But for you as a coach, are you excited about looking at these young players? And what do you know about these players like Sider and Raymond?
Of course, I'm excited about those young players. Being within the division, we were able to play those guys a lot. What excited me about those two, obviously, statistically, numbers, they had great years. A Rookie of the Year in this league is an unbelievable honor and special. But those guys had an edge about them. And you know what I'm talking about. I saw Raymond in our players' faces, not giving an inch, not backing down. Mo Sider, he showed that identity throughout this year. Being on the opposing team bench, and you ask about those two players specifically, yes, you can see some talent, but I saw some compete and some swagger and attitude that got me very excited. I don't know them great. I'll learn them as individuals, as people early in the process here, but from afar, that was very exciting.
Talk about your coaching staff. When do you think you'll have that all completed?
It's a huge priority, probably one of my top priorities right now. I have a previous relationship with Alex Tanguay. He checks off a ton of boxes for me personally. I did not play in this league. I would like to surround people that have played in this league. I think there's huge value to that for our room, but for me personally. Obviously, he had a great career. He's an offensive-minded guy. He thinks outside the box offensively a little bit. So he checks off a ton of boxes, but I want it on his terms. I'm going to talk to him within the next couple of days here. I know it's important for our management team that he's back. That makes it important for me. So we would like to get him back in the fold, in the mix. And I think the huge priority is going to be that defensive coach. Obviously, we have a young, up-and-coming D-core, which is very attractive, but they still have a lot of growth and development to do. So I think a good defensive-minded, I would love someone that played and coached both, but that's not the end be-all. But that's going to be important. So that'll be priority. Those will be the first two priorities probably within the next week or so. And then we'll try to round out our staff from there.
As you know, Derek, it's a tough division, the Atlantic Division, and obviously the Red Wings and Tampa Bay played each other 4 times each and every year. But how do you handicap this division? Because there's a lot of good teams.
it's a scary division. But I look at it as a challenge, though. Even within Tampa, I believe it elevated Tampa to play within that division every single night. I mean, you could argue 3 or 4 or 5 of the top 10 teams in the league sit within that division. I think it elevated Toronto. I think it elevated the Florida Panthers, and I hope to do the same. I hope it does the same for the Detroit Red Wings. When you're playing those type of teams every single night, where there's nowhere to hide, you're battling for position of those teams, I think it elevates your team, and that's what's going to happen with the Detroit Red Wings.
Did John Cooper give you any advice when you said, "See ya, I'm going to Detroit"?
No, it was actually a little tough. It was a little emotional. One, he's been my biggest fan. Not so much advice, but more, you're so ready. You're more than ready. I hate to see you leave. We've done something special, but just, the emotions of, he hires me where they kept getting short of that ultimate goal of winning a Stanley Cup. He asked me to be part of getting us over the hump. And then to fulfill that as a group, not only to do it once, but to do it twice. It was special. It was a little emotional, but I learned a ton from John. One, how he manages a room, how ultimately he manages a room where we can coach, we can put a structure together, but when it ultimately comes from the room, that's when it wins on the ice. And we did that in Tampa, no different than our staff. We had an all-inclusive staff. We shared everything. We had each other's back. We made each other better. And those were 2 experiences I want to bring to any organization I ever go to, and ultimately here for the Detroit Red Wings.
Derek, I know it's been a long day for you, a long week too, but a couple of fun questions before we leave here. Someone told me you had a name, Newsy.
Newsy.
A nickname. Explain.
That's a great question. So all hockey historians, and obviously the history of this organization, Newsy Lalonde played for the Montreal Canadiens. He's actually in the Hall of Fame. I think he's from Cornwall, Ontario, which is just over the border from where I grew up in Brazier Falls, New York. It's just the same name. It's easy. It's a historic hockey name, and it's just there's people in the league that don't even know I'm Derek or my first name. It's Newsy. It's what it is, and I love it. I don't mind it, and that's kind of where the Newsy name came from.
Well, I know you're a workaholic. That's what I've heard from a lot of people. But when you're away from the rink and you just want to get away, what does Derek Lalonde like to do?
Family. It's amazing. Early, I started to get my golf handicap within a respectable spot. I cycle a ton. It's a good way to get my mind. I love cycling. But now, especially when my kids are growing, it's family. When I get out of the rink, I'm right to family duty. I enjoy driving my kids to hockey, my daughter gymnastics, not only to be there for the event, but those 20, 25 minutes of there and back are very important. So right now, I wish I had a little more exciting habits or hobbies to tell you, and it's a good thing. The family occupies everything.
Well, Derek, thank you for taking your time to talk with us today, and all the best here in Detroit, and welcome to Detroit.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.